So what is a hypothesis? It is an idea, okay? But it is not just any idea. It is an idea that can be put to test. Simply put, it is a testable idea, okay? It is an educated guess, not a random guess. It is an educated guess about the solution of a problem. That means you must have done some homework on the problem before coming up with such a guess, okay? The word hypothesis consists of two words. So it's made up of two words, hypo and thesis. Hypo means tentative, and tentative is not definite. It's not fixed. And thesis means statement about solution of a problem. Thus, hypothesis means a tentative statement about the solution of a problem. So you're kind of offering a tentative solution, okay, to the problem. Hypothesis is subject to verification. It is to be verified empirically. That means based on some experiments, based on some scientific experiments, you will verify the hypothesis and you will come to the conclusion whether the hypothesis is true or not true. A hypothesis is a specific, testable prediction about what you expect to happen in your study. So, hypothesis is obviously testable, as we've already talked about that. And it is specific. It should be specific. Hypothesis is a prediction about what will happen in your study, what you expect to happen in your study. In a hypothesis, there will be three components: the variables, population, and the relationship between the variables. A hypothesis does not have to be correct. You don't know whether the idea that you have come up with, the educated guess that you have come up with, is true or not. That is something which time will tell. While the hypothesis predicts what the researchers expect to see, the goal of research is to determine whether this guess is right or wrong. So the whole point of your research is to prove whether your hypothesis is true or your hypothesis is false. So there are various sources of hypothesis, origins of hypothesis, specialization in a field, published works, research journals, seminars, current trends on the research area, hunch or intuition, findings of others, okay, research findings of others, a body of theory or a theory, analysis of the area, social culture, considering existing practices and needs, extension of the investigation, offshoots of research studies in the field. Well, offshoots here can mean branches, okay? Personal experience. So these are some of the sources of hypothesis. Characteristics of a good hypothesis. A good hypothesis must possess the following characteristics. What are they? It should always be clearly stated and precisely stated. And you should always remember that a hypothesis is always in the form of a statement, not a question, okay? It should be verified empirically. And it should not be contradictory. It should specify variables between which the relationship is to be established. So whatever variables there are in your studies, hypothesis should specify those variables, okay? And yes, hypothesis should be limited in scope. It should not be wide, it should not be broad. Otherwise, the research study will become too vast and impossible to conduct. It does not conflict with any law of nature which is known to be true. That means it should be in harmony with the law of nature. It guarantees that available tools and techniques will be effectively used for the purpose of verification. So whatever tools, whatever techniques that are available, they will be effectively used while verifying the hypothesis. It should be stated as far as possible in most simple terms so that the same is easily understandable by all the concerned. So whoever is reading your study, whoever is taking a look at your hypothesis, they should be able to comprehend what you mean. Okay, so it should not be filled with complex terms. Rather, they should be written in simple terms and simple forms. It should be amenable to testing within a reasonable time. So we have come to the most important part of this class. Types of hypothesis. Null hypothesis. Second, alternate or research hypothesis. Directional hypothesis and non-directional hypothesis. So let us study each one of them in detail. So let us start with null hypothesis. So null hypothesis is the starting point of a study. What is null hypothesis? This is a hypothesis that proposes no difference or relationship between two variables. What do you mean by this? So let us say there are two variables. Null hypothesis will say that there is no relationship between these two variables. No relationship, no difference between these two. And it is denoted by H naught, as you can see, H naught, okay? H and a small 0. So what do you mean by null? Null means no difference. Null means there is no difference between the variables. Zero difference. It involves a statement that says there is no relationship or no significant difference. You should add the word no here. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll put it here. No. Okay? No relationship or no significant difference between two groups that the researcher compares on a certain variable. Okay? When you hear the word null hypothesis, just remember these two words. No difference. Okay? I'll give you a few examples and you'll understand it. So don't worry. So let us look at some examples of null hypothesis. There is no difference. Note these two words, no difference. There is no difference in the academic performance of high school students who participate in extracurricular activities and those who do not participate in extracurricular activities. So when we compare these two groups, high school students who participate in extracurricular activities and high school students who do not participate in extracurricular activities, you will find no difference. So that is a null hypothesis. There is no significant difference between the achievement of high school athletes and that of non-athletes. Just like the previous example, when you compare these two groups, you'll find that there is no significant difference between the two, and that is also a null hypothesis. And last point, researchers work to reject or disprove the null hypothesis. This is extremely important. It might be asked in the exam. Which hypothesis is the researcher trying to reject or disprove? You should always tick null hypothesis. And please know that in a research study, the researcher is always trying to reject the null hypothesis. Next is research hypothesis or alternate hypothesis. So, what is this? What is alternate hypothesis? So, this is the hypothesis which you come up with after rejecting the null hypothesis. And because of that, it will always be opposite to null hypothesis. It will always contradict null hypothesis. When the null hypothesis says there is no relationship, the alternate hypothesis will always say there is a relationship. Okay? This hypothesis proposes a relationship between two or more variables and it is symbolized as H1 or HA. This is the hypothesis the researcher tries to prove. In contradiction to null hypothesis, where we try to reject the null hypothesis, here we are always trying to prove the alternate hypothesis. We are always trying to prove the research hypothesis. So let's take an example. Here is the null hypothesis. An example which was already cited before. There is no significant difference between the academic achievement of high school athletes and that of non-athletes. The null hypothesis is there is no difference, there is no significant difference. After rejecting this null hypothesis, let us say that we have rejected this null hypothesis. The research hypothesis will be the academic achievement of high school non-athletes is higher than that of high school athletes. The alternate hypothesis will be opposite of null hypothesis, which was rejected. Okay, which was rejected. And as a result of that rejection, the alternate hypothesis will be there is a difference, there is a relationship between the two. Research hypothesis can be either directional or non-directional. So before we learn about directional and non-directional hypothesis, let us look at the differences between null and alternate. So in null hypothesis, no relationship between two variables exists. But when we talk of alternate hypothesis, there is some difference between these two. We can also say there is some statistical significance between two variables. You will observe no effect in null hypothesis, but in alternate hypothesis, there will be some observed effect. Researcher tries to reject null hypothesis. Remember this point, this is very important. Researcher tries to prove alternate hypothesis or the research hypothesis. No changes in opinions or actions. We will see changes in opinions or actions under alternate hypothesis. It is always indirect and implicit in null hypothesis, but in alternate hypothesis, direct and explicit, clearly stated. Okay, so listen very carefully. So in null hypothesis, if you see a difference between these two variables, if you see a relationship between these two variables, then that is because of chance. It is a result of chance, okay? But in alternate hypothesis, whatever difference, whatever statistical significance or relationship between the two variables, it is a result of real effect, okay? What is directional hypothesis? The word directional itself is self-explanatory, isn't it? It is the hypothesis which stipulate or specify the expected direction of the relationship between variables. That means this type of hypothesis will give you a sense of direction. Okay, it gives you a sense of direction of the relationship. Will it be negative? Will it be positive? Will it go up? Will it go down? Left or right? It should give you that sense of direction. Okay? That is, the researcher predicts not only the existence of a relationship, but it also states its nature. That means it simply doesn't say, hey, there is a relationship between these two variables. But it also states the nature of this relationship is so and so. Okay? Examples. High school students who participate in extracurricular activities have lower GPA than those who do not participate in such activities. So note the word lower. It is most definitely specifying which way the direction of the relationship is going. And in this case, it is going lower. Adolescent boys with high IQ will exhibit low anxiety than adolescent boys with low IQ. Similarly, the same situation here. Note the word low. One variable is lower than the other, right? Women will have higher scores than men in the subject of home science. And here also, the direction of the relationship is going upwards. One variable is higher than the other. Now we're looking at non-directional hypothesis. It obviously is the opposite of directional hypothesis. It is a hypothesis which does not stipulate, it does not specify the expected direction of the relationship between variables. That is, no prediction about the exact nature of the relationship is made. The direction of the effect is not specified. It doesn't get more clearer than that. You will get no sense of direction of the relationship whatsoever. Examples. The academic performance of high school students is related to their participation in extracurricular activities. Here it simply states there is a relation. There is a relationship, but it doesn't tell us which way it's going. Second, there exists a difference in the anxiety level of adolescents, boys of high IQ and low IQ. Same here. It simply states there is a relationship, there is a difference, but where is it going? You have no idea. There will be a difference in the scores between women and men in the subject of home science. Here also, it simply states there is a relationship, there is a difference, but where is it going? Is it going high? Is it going low? The direction is not specified here. Formulating hypothesis. So, how do you come about formulating hypothesis in the first place? Well, hypothesis is not merely a collection of information. And just because you have collected some factual information, it will not automatically lead to formulation of hypothesis. No, it doesn't work like that. Because hypotheses are the results of what? Considerable speculation and imaginative guesswork. So, hypotheses are based partly on facts that are already known and partly conceptual. There are no precise rules for formulating hypothesis. However, there are certain favorable conditions which are conducive to their formulation. What are they? The first necessary condition for the formulation of hypothesis is richness of background knowledge. The researcher may find himself lost in the process if he does not have a thorough idea and mastery of the existing knowledge. Whichever area of interest you would like to conduct your research on, make sure to have a thorough idea of what is taking place and what has already taken place in that area of study. Okay, so that is what we mean by background knowledge, existing knowledge. Hypotheses may be formulated correctly by persons who have rich experiences and academic background, but they can never be formulated by those who have poor background knowledge. Reasonably so. Second condition for formulating hypothesis is versatility of intellect. That means you need to have a certain degree of intelligence in you in order to formulate hypothesis. A person with very low IQ just cannot come up with a hypothesis just like that. It takes intellect, it takes intelligence and skills to come up with a meaningful hypothesis. So, the researcher uses symbolic logic and mathematics to deduce a hypothesis from a particular theory. How is he able to do that? Because he has a versatile intellect. So, in the process of hypothesis formulation, the researcher works on numerous parts, and he may be led to blind alleys, and only rarely he may be led to the right path. So, hypothesis formulation kind of sounds like a process of trial and error. You may have to walk down the wrong paths in order to finally be led to the right path. The researcher therefore has to exercise great restraint and command considerable patience. He has to make a consistent effort and develop certain habits and attitudes. Analogy and other practices. I'm sure you know what analogy is. Analogy is the observation of similarities between two events. Analogies also lead the researcher to clues that he might find useful in the formulation of hypotheses and for finding solutions to problems. The researcher, however, should use analogies with caution, as they are not foolproof tools for finding solutions to problems. And last but not the least, at times, conversations and consultations with colleagues and experts from different fields are also very helpful in hypothesis formulation. So after learning whatever that we have learned about hypothesis, let us look at the importance of hypothesis in research. Hypotheses facilitate the extension of knowledge in an area. So, hypothesis will, without fail, extend the already existing vast ocean of knowledge in any given area of study. Yes, hypotheses enable the researcher to relate logically known facts to intelligent guesses about unknown conditions. So, what it means is, with the help of hypothesis, the researcher is able to form logical relationships. Okay? Logical relationships between facts and facts which are yet to be known. Hypotheses provide direction to the research. Yes, it tells us which way to go, where not to go. So the hypothesis tell the researcher specifically what he needs to do and find out in his study. Okay, so it helps in the selection of relevant facts and variables that the researcher needs in his study, and hypotheses provide a basis for selecting the sample and research procedures to be used in the study, and also the statistical techniques needed in analysis of data and the relationships between the variables to be tested are also implied by the hypothesis. And furthermore, the hypothesis helps the researcher to delimit his study in scope so that it does not become broad or unwieldy. Based on the conclusions brought about by the hypothesis, the research can be made more interesting, more meaningful to the reader. And with that, we have come to the end of this class. I want you to take care, stay safe, and I'll be uploading a video very soon.